Many people over the years have talked to me about coming into Catholic Church, and they have a common experience, an experience of great peace that they find in the church. Some of them have attributed this sense of peace to the building, the big high ceiling, the stained glass, the statues, the ambience of the church that is responsible for that feeling of peace. It made me think, though, if we go into an empty theatre or maybe an empty football stadium, would we experience that same sense of peace, that sense of peace that we seem to get in the church? A few weeks ago, I was in Birmingham. I was visiting one of the museums, and it was empty at the time, and it was that lovely sense of quiet. It was great to just walk around the galleries, looking at the various exhibits. But even though it was quiet, it didn't have that sense of peace. And it made me think, there's a big difference between peace and quiet. In some of the old films, the old Hammer House of Horror films with Peter Cushing and Boris Karloff, some of them were set in old houses, old empty houses, which were very quiet and spooky, scary. You'd hardly say that there was a sense of peace in these places. So just because somewhere is quiet doesn't necessarily mean that it's a peaceful place. But the church, the building of the church, is a very peaceful place. But why is that? What is it in the church that gives it that sense of peace? What is it, and where is it coming from? I must confess that I spent a lot of time away from the church, quite a few years, but it was in 2009 when the relics of St Thérèse came to Lancaster Cathedral that everything kind of changed. I remember Mum suggesting that I take a visit to the relics, and I must admit I wasn't keen, but I was curious about what was going on in the church, because it had all been on the news the evening before. So that curiosity led me into the back of the church, and I sat on the back pew. And I remember there was lots of people milling up and down the centre aisle going to see the relics. There was also lots of quiet conversations going on around the church. So it wasn't quiet, but there was a real deep sense of peace, a real calmness, And so I just sat there and I let it wash over me. So I stayed for about half an hour, and then I went back home. Then the next day, I decided after work that I'd pay another visit to the church, to my surprise. And that became quite a regular occurrence. I would finish work, go and spend 5 or 10 minutes in the peace of the church, just soaking up this atmosphere, this presence. And this carried on for a few months. It was about this time that I started to question, does God really exist? Is God real? Is this presence in the church, is this the presence of God? And if so, if God does exist, why is this presence so strong in the church? Why is it not as strong in Asda, or down the pub, or in the park? Why is it in the church? And I had this question running around my mind when I went to visit a Franciscan priest in Preston. It was this meeting with this priest in Preston that really changed everything. Because I had these thoughts running around my head. Does God really exist? What is this presence, this peace in the church? If that is the presence of God, why is it not everywhere? And so during the course of our conversation, I just asked the question, And without pausing, he just turned to me and he said, well, when you're in the church, you're in the physical presence of Jesus Christ. The physical presence, he's really there with you in the tabernacle. And that was kind of like a bombshell to me, because being brought up as a Catholic, we're taught, obviously, that Jesus is present in the Eucharist. But it was only at that point that I realised that I hadn't really believed it. It was just something that was just said. I hadn't really felt it. So that one sentence really rocked me. So when the priest says the words of consecration and raises the host and raises the chalice, Jesus Christ becomes truly present, physically present, right there on the altar. Jesus Christ, body, blood, soul and divinity, physically present on the altar. That changed everything. If that's real, and that presence in the church is the presence of Jesus in the tabernacle, well, that changes everything. So this is the presence we feel in the church, the physical presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. In John 14, verse 27, Jesus says to his disciples, "My peace I leave you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. My peace I give you." So 2,000 years later, that peace we still feel in the church. That peace we feel in the Eucharist, in the tabernacle, at Holy Communion when we receive the Lord. Charles de Foucauld, on his quest to find God, would wander from church to church, spending hours sitting or kneeling in front of the tabernacle. And he wrote, "Even though I wasn't a believer, I started going to church. It was the only place where I felt at ease, and I would spend long hours there repeating this strange prayer, 'My God, if you exist, allow me to know you.'" It struck me that the church was the only place he felt at ease. In the church, the physical church, in the presence, the physical presence of Jesus in the tabernacle. I could relate to that one sentence. And that's why I'm here today, really. That revelation pointed my life in a new direction to serve the Lord as a priest. We call this presence of Jesus in the Eucharist the real presence. It's the reality of Jesus Christ, body, blood, soul and divinity, present here for us today in the same way he was present to his disciples 2,000 years ago. And that peace that we experience when spending time in the church is the real peace of Christ. One of my favourite prayers is the Adoro Te Devote of St Thomas Aquinas, and it speaks of that concealment, the concealment of Jesus in the Eucharist, Jesus Christ fully present to us in the form of bread and wine. So I thought to end this little video that I'd share this prayer with you. Thomas writes, "Godhead here in hiding, whom I do adore, masked by these bare shadows, shape and nothing more. See, Lord, at thy service, low lies here a heart, lost, all lost in wonder at the God thou art. Seeing, touching, tasting, are in thee deceived. How says trusty hearing, that shall be believed. What God's Son has told me, take for truth I do. Truth himself speaks truly, or there's nothing true. On the cross thy Godhead made no sign to men. Here thy very manhood steals from human ken. Both are my confession, both are my belief. and I pray the prayer of the dying thief. I am not like Thomas, wounds I cannot see, but can plainly call thee Lord and God as he. Let me to a deeper faith daily nearer move, daily make me harder hope and dearer love. Jesus, whom I look at, shrouded here below, I beseech thee send me what I thirst for so, some day to gaze on thee face to face in light, and be blessed forever with thy glory sight. Amen.